Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Mars, host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show, on location in Detroit, Michigan, north of Detroit. Listen, I hope everybody's having a blessed day. Man, I have a lot of things to talk about today. I want to give a shout out for the weekend. Mass Ickner in Baltimore was fabulous. Thank you for the shout out. Also, I want to give a shout out to Mate Singles, hosted me for a great comedy show. Life and love and happiness for all of you trying to find your suitable mate. It was a nice singles con, is what they call a singles con. Shout out to Zafar Chaudhry, Sister Robina, and so many people that made that event possible. Now, I also want to give a shout out to my family down in Charlotte, North Carolina. Of course, you guys know we had a show down there. We were supporting our sister had been assaulted in her classroom. And let me say, this has been a very politically divisive type of thing. I would say racially divisive type of thing, unfortunately, with the young man who was involved in assaulting the sister. But I would say this, shout out to the Charlotte Muslim community, particularly African-American Muslim community, WD community. They came out in droves and massive support. We had a good laugh. We supported the sister. I met the young lady who was attacked. I met her family. And I think in a nutshell, all I'm going to say here is I was really, really happy to be a part of that process. If there's healing to be done, if there's just the air of lightheartedness that could be lent to the situation, shout out, of course, to Brother Jabril Howe and Maury Salikhan, who came out. These things are vitally important, and to be a part of it, I want to say, to find myself in a scenario where I think I can contribute something positive is absolutely a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mercy to Allah. And I also want to add the fact that, the topic we're about to have today, which is pedagogy of the Muslim silence. Pedagogy of the Muslim silence. This is huge, brothers and sisters. And I need everyone who's out there to just listen and participate and kind of understand what we're trying to do. Satana, can we stall for a minute? Because you know what I didn't do? I did not do the Instagram. Can we stall for a minute? I'm actually going to do that while I'm talking because I'm arrogant enough to think I could do it, brothers and sisters. So bear with me. We got a lot going on. And if you're watching the news, you know that there's something underfoot. And I would say this, not in a way to scare anybody. It's just the fact that, I see things coming down the road, just like many of you do. We see things coming down the road, and sometimes we go, well, how did it get to that situation? Like, how did that happen? And I think the thing that we should begin to look at is the fact that we do have an active part in this. We have, for lack of a better word, we have responsibility. We have responsibility. Maybe people don't understand that. Maybe they run away from that. I think one of the scariest things out there, brothers and sisters, is Muslim silence, where we're not out here talking to or speaking truth to power. And because of that, it seems as though, folks think or they treat us like, we don't know what's happening, or worse, we don't care. So the whole idea about apathy and the whole idea about not being aware, it's created this dissonance. We're in the middle of what is absolutely 100% a genocide. But to say the word genocide to some folks invokes the fact that somehow that reality makes me anti-Semitic. No, it makes me educated. It makes me aware. And unfortunately, it's been a bludgeoning for some folks that they feel like, hey, I can mute this intellect. I can mute this empathy. I can mute this caring. I can mute, for lack of a better word, and I'm going to say this, just muting mercy. So listen, we're going to be right back. Thank you guys so much for your patience. This is the Shout Out Show. I'm Preacher Mars. Don't move. All right, so to give credit where credit is due, if you ever heard the word pedagogy of, the original title is Pedagogy of the Oppressed, a landmark treatise by Brazilian educator Paulo Freire, who was in the education system, and he talked about how the education system oppressed the poor. He talked about how there needed to be a transition away from the banking method of teaching. Banking method of teaching still exists in U.S. schools today, whereby teachers pour information into students, and it's very passive learning. And what I mean by passive learning is, the students aren't really engaged to further investigate or take the information and further investigate the world around them, the environment around them, to be problem posed, if you will, where I take some information and I'm applying it or making it applicable to problems and situations around me, stirring the conversations. In the end, what you're looking for is liberation. So we're going to be talking about that today, the pedagogy of Muslim science, which is a methodology of how you teach. So I'm talking about the methodology or the teaching pattern of Muslim silence. Before we get into that, I want to make sure we shout out all our people out in shout out show land. I want to give a shout out to Sister Ree. Assalamu alaikum to our barakatuh, Sister Ree. Hope you're doing well. Kicking it with her friend. I'm going to give a shout out to my main man, Altaf Rashid. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, all the way. Bringing that love all the way from Toronto, Canada. Thank you so much, brother. One of our day ones. Also, my main man, I'll see him this weekend, brother JT, Johnny L. Thomas. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, little brother. Thank you so much for sharing your time. I want to give a shout out to Sister Satana Whitfield she makes the shout out show World Go Round. Our executive producer is so talented, so committed. I'm telling you, brother, if she ever left this show, it better be for a major, it better be for the best show out there. She's one of the best executive producers out there. And one day she's going to get her shine, hopefully soon, very soon. Okay. We have a few people out in Instagram land. Let's see, we got Amani. I'm just going to say Amani, salams to you. Assad, Allah, thank you so much. Life, FOMO. Okay, listen, this is not my day. I ain't gonna get it all straight, but please bear with me. So let's get to the topic at hand. I came across Paola Freire when I was an educator in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and really my first year was having an extremely difficult time trying to figure out why my educational platform or my educational strategies were not working with these inner city kids. I taught severely most disturbed kids, and it wasn't to me a big leap. It may have been some issues about maturity levels and things like that, but clearly I was not reaching these kids. And in a deep dive, I was trying to figure out why I was not reaching these kids, and it came out to the fact that the modality of teaching that I was presenting to these kids that was being taught to me, it was a failed modality. And because when I tried to give it to the kids, clearly I'm just perpetuating a situation scenario whereby it's been failed education initiative, failed education. The classroom was a prison. In some regards, it was a grave. It was a cemetery. Why? Because what I taught the children clearly was something about being passive. Paola Freire talks about teachers being vessels, emptying information into the students that keeps them passive and docile. It does not keep them intuitive. It does not make them intellectually curious about the things going around them. At that school, 27th Street School in Milwaukee is no longer there. I had an epiphany that the failed structure that they were trying to get me to perpetuate, I had to change it. And the liberation didn't actually necessarily happen for the students, it happened for me as an educator. I made a fundamental choice about how I was going to do things. And at that point, it literally opened up my classroom. It's opened up so many things in terms of my education style, even my comedy style, brothers and sisters, is an act of liberation. I want to give information that keeps me free, but also reminds people that you're supposed to be free too, or that helps them remind other people that the revolution that we talk about is, self-actualization. The pedagogy of Muslim silence is different because we are getting a pedagogy that creates, if you will, self-muting. Let me tell you about self-muting. Self-muting is that we have been so consumed, we are so obsessed about what's going to happen to us, we're not focusing on what can happen for us. Clearly, the whole situation, this has happened over a period of years. I would say maybe over the last 8-9 years. It began within the Muslim community with this whole dialogue of who represents us, who represents the Muslim community. I've referred numerous times about Muhammad Ali's janazah. When he passed away, there was an open conversation, very open conversation among immigrant Muslims, African American Muslims, about who was going to lead the Muslim community. The people who were not in the conversation were Imam Muhammad Muhammad, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Some people talked about Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, but we never got to that point. And what happened then is that there was a split. This split, I did everything I could do in my power with the power of comedy, the magic of making people laugh, to bring us together to understand that we all have the importance and accountability of agency within our own Muslim community. It was strong in 2003, 2004, but as this becomes not, I will say, it moves away from the early adopters. It becomes something of a mantra, a bumper sticker slogan, Muslims united. We weren't united. And then we had this election. This election of 2024 showed everybody in many regards that we were not united. And once we were not united, people say we're not worried about who speaks for you, because whoever it is you think she speaks for you, as long as you're quiet about it, they don't really speak for you. That person is going out on a limb in many regards to speak about things, but it looks like an aberration. Let me explain. It looks like an aberration. It looks like it's like free throws in the National Basketball League. If a person shoots 50% of the line and then one night they shoot 9 for 10, people go, oh, he's improved. No, that's an aberration. The habits, if you will, the habits, the foundations that are not positive or faulty or whatever, are still there. And what we've gotten into this situation now is Muslim silence, because we are now being taught that expressing ourselves has negative impact on the things we want, whether it's our families, whether it's our careers, health, eventually even our lives, that it has negative impact. The whole thing about BDS, I wish in many regards we'd go back and really have a large scale discussion about BDS in the context of speaking out against Israel. Now, you have to look at this from a logical point. Forget Israel. If you spoke out against injustice, then you speak out against injustice. It doesn't matter if it's Israel. It doesn't matter if it's Saudi Arabia. It doesn't matter if it's a country in Africa. It doesn't matter if it's going on down the street. Injustice is injustice. But now we have allowed ourselves to be put into very unstrategic positions whereby people tell us, if you come out of there saying X, Y, and Z, you're automatically canceled. Or if you come out saying it this way, well, I have the right to put restrictions on your space. And what happens is we no longer have the thing of God-given agency, that we can stand in our place and say, I have a right to exist. What we have now is people telling us you have a right to exist this way. You have a right to speak that way. You only can express yourself that way. And in the end, it still has to be rubber stamped by somebody who has nothing to do with you. If you read Surkov, there's a thing that says, do not consult the Christians and the Jews on issues of the Muslims. Now, somebody say you're being discriminatory. Somebody said, oh, you don't want us in your conversations. No, it's just that the issues of Muslims are the issues of Muslims. You don't see Muslims trying to run into a synagogue or in the church trying to express ourselves saying, hey, I have a right to be here. You don't have a right to be here. And if you're going to be in that space, then you have to follow our decorum. There's 2 times I've thought about this. And I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was not right. Many years ago, I was maybe 15, 16 years old, and I was actively investigating, considering the Nation of Islam. And a brother came to me and said, they don't speak for Black people. And I said, what do you mean? He said, they don't speak for Black people. Now, the person who said it to me was not Black. He was Jewish. And I had to ask the question, well, who do you think speaks for Black people? And he said, we're all brothers. He said, we're all brothers. I said, yeah, but who do you think speaks for Black people? He says, I'm your brother. I said, but who do you think? And in the end, he says, well, we have a shared history of oppression and the slave trade and discrimination. And in the end, he says, we have a much more rightful voice, a much more righteous voice to speak about oppression in America. And we'll include Black people because of the Holocaust. At that point, I said, my dear friend, my dear brother, you do not have a right to speak for Black people. The same as I have never thought about having the right or the position to speak for Jewish people. I said, you are seriously skewed that you even have that thought. And he said, hey, if you feel that way, and we're not friends anymore. But what is it that we are doing when we're not telling people that's the way we feel and we're not friends anymore? And I'm fine with that. Putting a period in some of these conversations and relationships that we know aren't healthy, as opposed to a comma, an elliptical, hoping to pick up the conversation maybe down the line when things get better, maybe when in Israel, maybe when Gaza, when the people are not starving, maybe in Gaza when people are not being attacked, but there's a ceasefire, that we can go back to relations. You can't go back to those relations again. You cannot go back to those relations again, brothers and sisters. That is the pedagogy of Muslim silence. That you keep talking and verbalizing nonsense to people who don't hear you. You think that you're talking. You think that you're being heard. But the people who don't respect you, the people that oppress you, they don't hear you. Paola Freire's book was outlawed, rightfully so, because it was revolutionary back in the day. And he challenged something that people don't like to hear. He challenged the elites. And just the same as we sit here right now, the problems of the elites are the fact that the elites are not creative, only creative in this space of creating disruption, of creating inequality and unbalance in people that don't look like them. You see, we're living now in a time where anti-Semitism is being used by people who are not Jewish to silence the Muslim audience. To go into institutions of higher learning and under the auspices of anti-Semitism, say to Harvard, say to some of these other schools, Columbia, Buckle, it is what it is. But saying, you know what, under these rules, under these rules, you must shut up. Under these rules, you must acquiesce to what we're telling you Or the penalty is we will effectively disrupt your ability to educate. Now, I came up with this pedagogy of Muslim silence because, like I said, we're dealing with education now. Harvard's going to be in the news for the next couple years with these lawsuits and counter lawsuits and dealing with Department of Justice. Listen, the Department of Justice is now, not the Department of Education, the Department of Justice now is going after Harvard. Why is that important? Because Harvard, brothers and sisters, is the bastion of the highest level of education in the United States. Everybody wants to get into Harvard. But if you take down the top, the rest will crumble. That's the philosophy. And here we are, a Muslim body. I'm not talking about a Muslim political action committee. I'm talking about a Muslim body politic that's ruled, framed, evolved by what? The pursuit of justice, opportunity, freedom, love, fairness. For my beloved prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that we now, in these times, if there existed a Rasulullah, peace and blessings be upon him, he'd be deported. Or worse, incarcerated. Let me go further. For those that do their homework, there was a man called the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, during wartime, stood up and said, a black man has a right to honor the word of God as opposed to have to follow the word of the government. He was a conscientious objector before he even really heard the word conscientious objector. And they railroaded this man, and he had to do 5 years in prison. Muhammad Ali fell into the same thing. Look at the progression of people who own their own agency, who bucked the trend of Muslim silence. Why is this important? Islam back in the 50s and 60s was a fledgling religion among African Americans. It was fledgling. What I mean by fledgling, it didn't pose a threat until, hear me now, it didn't pose a threat until it challenged the status quo. That much the same as Paola Freire said, that all of a sudden the education that was being put into these passive minds, or either one, the information was taken and it was repackaged into a certain type of activism that sought liberty and justice, or rejected all around. That is Islam in America. That is the rejector. And I remember with the Nation of Islam, not only rejecting the power structure, but calling into question in broad daylight who the oppressor was. Saying, this white establishment oppresses me. This white establishment affects and gives us negative, deficient education. It rules us out for housing. This is the mindset, people. In the 50s and the 60s. The question is, where's that mindset now? Now, am I saying that? Okay, we have a culture of political leaders that are lazy. Yeah, in some regards. We have some brothers who hung in there. A shout out to Charles Rangel. He returned to Allah, 90-some years old. Very effective, but, overstayed his time in politics, many believe. But where's the new leadership? Where's the new language, the lexicon of liberation? I heard a song by Stevie Wonder said, can't put it in the hands of fate. Talking about liberation. We can't put it in the hands of fate. And it was made during the George Floyd period. Here we are 5 years later. They still never passed the George Floyd rule for really reorganizing policing. It may never, hear me now, it may never be passed again. They're not even talking about it. But herein, still, what are we talking about? Hold on a minute. I got a few people in Instagram. Mani Assad Life. Nazim Hussein, my main man, all the way from Australia. Love you, brother. Very funny cat. Man, him and uh, man, Fear of a Blind Planet. They were groundbreaking in Australia. All right, Sadiq, how you doing? Hungry Boy Vlogs. Well, I like my salon up until over the Katu. Man, Tariq, man, I had a ball with you, man, doing that podcast. I hope it came out well. Pensimic Voices, how you doing? The Silas Man, my main man, Bilal Salahuddin, and his sister, his queen, Sister Sonia Dalton Salahuddin. Well, I like my salon up until over the Katu. Good to see you. And bye, my thank you so much for joining. But listen, I want to end this and shout out to Brother Eric Carter. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. South Kakalaki. Salams to everybody. I just want people to think about this whole idea, pedagogy of Muslim silence. It is the way we are now being taught and trained to be silent. I think that the most dangerous Muslim in the world, to me, is that Muslim that knows inherently what Allah says, knows inherently the history of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, and put into a show of cause, cannot speak effectively to the masses, cannot own the agency. Last week's show was talking about the MAGA Muslim phenomenon, and that's what we have right now. People who talk around the issues. How are you going to be on an empowered panel about religious liberty and you watch bombs dropping on Muslims or Sudanese or people being deported? How do you have that conversation? And I can be big. Hey, listen, I can be wrong. Maybe I'm being too harsh. But check this out. Maybe I'm not being too harsh. Maybe I'm saying the things that are supposed to be said. You know, as a Muslim comedian, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to let you guys go. Someone asked me, "You happy with what you see on TV?" I said, "Hell no. Hell no." I said, because what you see on TV is what they want you to see on TV. To me, that is the Muslim silencing of Muslim comedy. Because you know what? We don't go to the schools. We don't go to the community anymore and say, what do you need from us as entertainers? How can my laughs help you build that school? How can writing jokes help you build a hospital? How can we feed these families? I see Muslim comedians sitting around waiting for the next damn gig, waiting for the phone to ring. That's not how we were raised. Now, I'm saying this for myself. It's not the way I was raised, brothers and sisters. That pedagogy of how I was raised was activism, where we understood that if you didn't do something, something was going to be done to you. And clearly, something is afoot. That's it for the shout out show today. You guys be amazing. Have a good week. Inshallah, I'll see you next week. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shout out show. Get rid of that pedagogy of Muslim silence. Holla at you later.